Mr. Saliya Wickramasuriya, Director General of Colombo Port City, thank you so much for being with us. Sri Lanka is going through a very difficult time. COVID-19 pandemic has devastated most economies of South Asia, but Sri Lanka's in particular, because the country was so dependent on tourists for its which were its economic backbone, foreign remittances which are now down to a trickle, and also the high global commodity price regime that seems to be ruling, which means that if for every dollar that Sri Lanka spends on oil, it regrets spending. Foreign exchange reserves in Sri Lanka are down to its lowest ever, and many analysts feel that the country is already bankrupt. In the middle of all this gloom and doom, the great shining beacon of hope is the Colombo Port City, which has begun work and is going to take off very soon in a bid to elicit investor interest. Mr. Wickramasuriya will share with us what he believes are the strongest points of the entirely new development which is coming up in Sri Lanka as the port city. So tell us a little bit about Port City and what it's going to do and how it's going to change the landscape of Sri Lanka.
Port City, it'll allow us, in the opinion of the Commission, to leverage a few advantages we already have. And those are historic advantages. You will know, I think, better than most people, the role that Sri Lanka played in the past and continues to play in terms of management of trade and cargo volumes in the subcontinent. And it has a port that's ranked number 22 in the world for containers. So it's already well placed in the logistics sphere of global transport. We simply want to add the financial and commercial element to facilitating trade with the port city, and also use the port city opportunity to transform management in Sri Lanka in general. So that's a longer term project. But initially it starts as an opportunity with no legacy infrastructure and no legacy, shall we say, legacy constraints, legal, regulatory, or otherwise. We have a fairly interesting mandate, and I can tell you more details about the legal structure as we proceed. But initially, I would just like to share the objectives of the Act under which the Commission sits. That makes sense because that's where we are obliged to go by law. And the Act primarily focuses on attracting foreign direct investment into Sri Lanka. Now, in order to do that, we have to create the environment that enables it and facilitates it and makes it competitive. And then the Act also foresees us improving business processes. In other words, streamlining the ease of doing business index factors, starting companies, stopping companies, winding up, hiring, firing, and all of that. Movement of people to make it an easy place to come, an easy place to live, and an easy place to leave from. Movement of finances, creation of jobs, and essentially generating economic impact to the country. So it doesn't have a revenue objective. It has a transformational objective by way of FDI and inward talent, shall we say, attracting best-in-class companies and brands. So it's a broad and tall objective. We don't have anything on the ground yet. So the Act permits 5 years of businesses to start under the law, but be located physically outside the port city. So we can actually proceed with implementing businesses or starting businesses outside the port city without having the infrastructure yet there. So it's an opportunity for us. We want to seize that, leverages our existing trade ties and investment relationships and our geographic location. And we want to make maximum use of the law that gives us some freedom to do things differently from the way Sri Lankan law currently is applied.
There were some things that the port city was required to already have achieved by way of construction, by way of acquisition, by way of reclamation. Where exactly are you on those timelines?
They reached and passed, but they have been to a great extent accomplished. So reclamation is 100% completed, but reclamation has to settle and then be certified as capable of sustaining building. So that technical certification takes a little time. We have thus far certified 34 out of 74 demarcated plots. So technical certification for promotion to invest on and build on, invest in and build on, 34 out of 74 for the moment.
Then comes the planning projects and proposals, which again, I think those timelines have not been met.
Fast. The culmination in Sri Lanka of a plan is when it is gazetted, and the Port City Master Plan is in the process of being printed under Gazette. It's been signed off by the President. It's a city that has already been planned and defined with building control, construction, development control guidelines, like regulations that define the theme, the purpose, the various parameters about building something on a plot. That's already been done.
What was going to come up there was obviously a residential and commercial complex of buildings, a major international school, a big international hospital, and so on. Now, how much of this has been done and how much of it remains?
It's all been planned. Now, we are in the process of discussing potential partnerships for these plots, the development of these plots. If you consider the marina, that comprises 4 plots and a hotel that's already been transacted and leased, and there's an investor working on developing those plots. Then so has the plot that is going to be built, the phase 1 of the Colombo International Financial Center, that's already been transacted, and designs and all the other associated steps are being conducted by the investor. We have a temporary project, which is the downtown duty free. It's temporary in terms of the structure is temporary because it's sitting on another plot. And eventually when the phase 2 of the Colombo International Financial Center comes up, the plan, I believe, is to move it into that and dispose of the temporary structure. But to catalyze some business in the project, and from the project, we are starting it in a temporary structure. Temporary sounds substandard, but it's not actually. It's a very nice prefabricated building with all the amenities and setup. School-wise, there's a short list of potential investors. Hospital, there's an even shorter list, but that's only because the hospital is now, we're actually in quite serious discussions, advanced discussions with a global brand, and I'd love to share it with you, but I can't until those discussions get finalized. There's a local partner involved as well, and
when do you expect to finalize this?
We believe, the commission has approved it in principle, and we are giving a period of silence while the local partner, who is a public listed company, they need to complete their agreements with the overseas partner and ultimately make their disclosure notices to the stock market. I would say that process could take a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks.
Sri Lanka is facing an acute foreign exchange crisis that, along with high commodity prices, is causing oil prices to go up, which downstream means that everything that happens in Sri Lanka is going to become costlier.
Correct.
And a high oil price regime for the foreseeable future means that the cost for the investor will also go up.
Yes.
Added to that is the problem of repatriation of profits and the problem of foreign exchange conservation. So now, how do you address all these problems, which granted may be only temporary, but still are very much there as a constraint for investors in future?
It's impossible to move in sync with the day-to-day macroeconomic challenges because most investors also take a long view. So we're keeping our eye on the horizon, talking with the partners that we are, and our expectation is that the country will take the necessary steps that might need to be taken, and if you like, remove in the future, by the time investments come to be realized, this uncertainty. Because you're absolutely right. It's already started happening. The price of food has gone up. The price of construction has gone up. Availability of fuel has dropped. And as a result, the price of food has gone up because the cost of transport has gone up. The whole thing, the numbers are frightening at the moment. One thing we have looked at in amongst all this is to create a difference in fiscal management between the port city investments and whatever is outside. So there are various constraints put in place now by the central bank for conserving foreign exchange, which lead to some reluctance from investors to park money in Sri Lanka. So we've created a separate, independent and unconnected banking product, if you like, which is unrestricted, so that people can bring money in and move money out without suffering the strictures that apply to bank people in Sri Lanka having foreign currency accounts. So that certainty we can give investors is that their money will not be subject to any of the restrictions that ours is, our foreign exchange. So they can bring money in and move money out. It's a separate kind of account set up for the purpose of investing in the port city. So we're trying to incentivize people to move money that they propose to at some point invest in Sri Lanka into a port city designated bank account, which will leave it will be aggregated for consolidation purposes, but separated for administration of reserves and liquidity.
Another problem arising out of this, flowing out of this, is the threat of expropriation.
So expropriation actually and nationalization, they are constitutionally safeguarded. There was an expropriation bill at some point in the an appropriations bill in Sri Lanka that was brought out, I think, in 2010, but it was repealed a few years ago. So now there is no threat of that, really. You're protected constitutionally. And in particular, the Port City Act has a special provision that agreements entered into by the Commission, between the Commission and investors, are inviolable. So I think the legal framework has now been put in place to protect investment.
Assuming that the current problems of power and electricity and supply and oil continue for some time, what is the backup that you have? Say, I'm an investor and I want to give you money to put into something. What guarantee do I have that I will get the requisite power and the water and the other elements that go into doing business?
Power and water are both in short supply in Sri Lanka. So what we have to contend with is not just the availability, but also the composition. So from the Port City point of view, we have taken a position that in view of the climate and sustainability targets that not just Sri Lanka, but the world and India as well, you're doing fantastically when it comes to integrating renewable energy. We've taken the policy decision that energy supply to the port city must be renewable, and also that we can't suffer any kind of failure of power or water or communication within the port city if we are to offer a city of the future for its inhabitants. So now, since the city is not there yet, we have a little time to actually put certain measures in place to assure that. So those are in the design phase. In simple terms, the sensitivity we have right now in Sri Lanka to power, we have power cuts at the moment, we have water cuts. Those by design will not be permitted to happen in the port city. Keeping in mind that the port city is not yet built. So we do have 2 or 3 years in which to put together a proper treatment of carbon footprint reduction, net zero water, sewage treatment, recycling, and so on and so forth. So the idea, the design objective, the design brief of the port city is to be unaffected by anything, be completely as sustainable in terms of energy and utilities.
Also, I think as an investor, people will be worried about the kind of tax treatment that they're going to face when they invest in Port City. At the moment, I believe taxation is between 14 and 28%.
Yeah.
Am I right?
That is right. That's typically it's between 14 and 28%, depending on the business sector. Some businesses are not taxed at all.
Like IT.
Foreign income generating businesses are not taxed. The tax regime in the port city will be variable. It is not a completely tax-free area. However, the Commission has decided to remove all fiscal burdens, which is tax, duty, VAT, and all the para tariffs, the small levies, that would be otherwise applicable for all 74 of the physical development. So now, if there's somebody coming in to build a hotel or a hospital or a school or a mixed development, those developments, the planned developments, each of those 74 plots, those will be completely, shall we say, that's the physical development part of it. Then each sector, the population sectors, whether it's banking, whether it's IT, whether it's IT-enabled services, knowledge exports, those businesses, financial services, that's not yet decided. What we are doing to give us that framework is we are benchmarking against a few, shall we say, logical competitive jurisdictions and working out what investors are looking for and replicating it here. So we have at the moment taken the decision to simply completely incentivize all physical development so that the city comes up. In terms of sectors within those business sectors, that is, the jury is still out on that. We're still doing the global benchmarking policy framework. Once the policy framework has been completed, we will then be able to offer incentives as required to different sectors.
During the construction phase, the funding costs were to be met 75% to the extent of 75% from FDI. What is the situation now?
The construction phase is 100% FDI. Government of Sri Lanka hasn't spent a cent. It's all been spent by the Czech Port City company. Government hasn't borrowed or counterparty funded any of it. But in return for that investment, government has given the project company, if I may call it that, leasehold rights, 99-year leasehold rights for certain plots of land. Approximately between 35 and 40% of the whole acreage has been given to the project as project marketable land on a 99-year lease. So the reclaimed property in its entirety belongs to the government, freehold. It's mapped into the Sri Lankan national map. A part of it has been handed to the project company on a 99-year lease for them to be able to monetize and recover the investment. So they have a couple of options. They can either sell the leasehold right, in which case what they do is they transfer the land back to the government and the commission signs a new lease with the new owner. Or the project company has the option to seek partners and form joint ventures and invest on the land themselves, keeping in mind that everything has been pre-planned and predefined. And then in that case, their return on investment happen over a longer period of time.
There were some complaints or objections from NGOs, from civil society about the reclamation and associated issues of livelihood, etc. Now, Sri Lanka, everything becomes political very quickly. What are the safeguards for all that?
So there is a standard safeguard mechanism which is meant to be captured in it's an environmental impact assessment, which also has social impact and other things. But ma'am, I would say that reclamation projects worldwide have this burden to carry, because reclamation itself is an ecological challenge. All I can say is that the reclamation that was performed here was accelerating something that would have normally happened anyway, because it is on the back of the Colombo Port expansion breakwater. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but we had an old port. We expanded the size of that port by building another new port out into the sea, 2 kilometers and then 2 kilometers up. That breakwater started accreting sand by sedimentation. So what is actually in the port city is that process has been accelerated by mining sand in different parts of the sea, testing it for quality, construction, and bringing it back here and pumping it onto the shore. So in summary, that was how the reclamation was done from sea mounds outside of fairly 10, 20 kilometers offshore. So that has all been studied. The impact on current, impact on sedimentation, impact on fauna, flora, marine has been looked at. And I don't know at this point in time if there are any burning issues. There was lots of protest at the time. The fishermen's livelihood was said to be under threat. And that was primarily because this was a basin that was very prolific for them for certain kinds of fish, king prawn, tiger prawns, and so on and so forth. But that hasn't really changed, because this project has not impinged on the exit of the Kalani River, which is the big sediment discharge outlet into the sea, into the neighboring sea. So at the moment, I believe environmentally, the Port City project has done everything it needs to satisfy the requirements of the country. That there will always be people who will say something about it, but not all of that is not addressed. We've addressed most of it.
Thank you,
okay. You're welcome.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.